Thanks for joining us. I am Ibrahim Sani. You're watching The Economy. I am at the residence of none other than Roshan Thiran's home, humble abode. And Roshan is, of course, the CEO and founder of Leaderonomics. I think it's a very well-known name. Roshan, let's talk a little bit more about the kind of environment that we're living in. It's at the tail end of the year. We all know what happened throughout the year. I think the biggest surprise that everybody didn't want but knew is happening or happened is, of course, the Trump win. There is also the whole macro environment changing right now, and then, of course, some of the elements that we're looking at: the rise of China, ASEAN chairmanship of Malaysia. You know, the strangeness of this is that as the world gets better with technology, the world becomes much more unclearer. How do you make sense of all this as we head into 2025?
Sure. And you know, if you look throughout history, whenever there's technological advances, there is an era, it's marked by an era of confusion, chaos, and disorder, right? So if you go back when fire and so on, but let me take you back about 120 years ago.
So fire, like the invention of wheel kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But let's go back 120 years when you had the big first, the industrial revolution, where you had a lot of innovation, great stuff happened, cars, electricity, light, radio, TV, aeroplanes, 1903, right? So between 1870 to about 1910, 1915, great innovation, all good stuff, right? But actually what happened was, 1915, World War I, we had, in spite of all this wonderful innovation, we had the Spanish flu, which is our COVID, right?
Yeah.
Then they had the Great Depression in the 20s and the 30s of World War II until 1948. And you know, whenever technology, something new, I wouldn't say technology, when new is introduced, it's marked by a time of chaos because there are no standards. So let's fast forward to today, where suddenly you have digital currency. Now, you know digital currency will win, just like 120 years ago, we sort of know today horses will always lose to cars.
Yeah.
Cars will win, right?
Yeah.
But back then, horses and cars are like, no, horse is better. Car is like, the guy the horse business is going to defend it to that. The guy starting out with cars is saying, no, that's the future. But that tension continues because there's no standard for cars. There's no right lane, left lane. There's no traffic lights. There's no ecosystem, no petrol stations, and so on and so forth. The same thing is happening today with generative AI. There's no standards. Think about cryptocurrency. If I asked you 30 years ago, which was the most currency you'd invest in, you say without heartbeat, Donald Trump's currency, US dollar. Today, you say, ooh, US dollar, maybe not.
Maybe not.
Even the Americans, right? Talk to Robert Kiyosaki, you say, no way, right?
No.
Because of
but
the
there are safe haven currencies, of course, but not necessarily the go-to of the US dollar.
But we know that crypto is going to win.
Yeah.
But which one? There's thousands. There's no standard.
Yeah.
Now, obviously today, post-Trump's election...
But what worries me is that you're mapping the similarities to precursor of the world wars. Are we heading to that kind of...
It could. And this is because most leaders don't understand the context of the age that they live in. And when you don't understand, and this is marked by two things. We don't move from old to new immediately. It's marked by a time of transition. Now, during that time of transition, there are no rules. It's Wild Wild West, right? So what happens there is that you have to navigate in a paradoxical way. There is no right and wrong answer. It's sometimes right, sometimes wrong, very contextual. So leaders need to know how to navigate this time of paradox or time of transition. Wow, when you come and there's standards, and we say, and this happened in 1948 with United, this is the way you fight, Geneva Convention, this is the way you treat children, you know, UNICEF, this is the way you deal with medicine, WHO. So once those standards are set in place, it's easy to be a leader. Because you know grey area, you know black and white very clearly.
But the so-called old New World Order, or the New World Order that is now old, came about at a time of great distress, great suffering, great loss of human life, great loss of economic parity across various nations, loss of hegemony across colonizers against their domain.
So is that so?
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is, are we looking at that like dramatic change? That's what I'm trying to say.
It could happen. Now, the upside to this is that we know if we have awareness that this is the situation. In the past, they didn't have this awareness. There's all this confusion, but we don't know why. Today, I think people are a little bit smarter to say, hey, throughout history, we can see these patterns. Now, when there's confusion, how do we help people? And this is where leadership becomes so critical, right? Leadership is not about executing business and driving business when there's clarity. It's about helping to change ambiguity into clarity. And this is why, whether it's country leadership, whether it's business leadership, right? I was just talking to a former Khazanah head of digital, and he said, companies shouldn't keep money in, your treasury should be kept in Bitcoin, and it shouldn't be kept in, fiat currency. But nobody's actually understanding where the world is changing, because if you can understand, then you can start to build your organization, your country, and say, how do I take the baby steps required to navigate the path towards that clarity? Because at one point in time, there will be a currency. That's the standard.
Yeah.
There'll be a
a
way of
winner
life. Then we call this the new way.
Yeah.
And then we look back and say, oh, remember the 20s, remember the this.
Yeah.
But that point hasn't come yet,
Yeah.
And that point takes a bit of tweaking and leadership to be established.
Yeah, it's a very disturbing notion to grapple with when you say that a leadership requirements is to bring ambiguity to clarity, when clearly ambiguity does not provide any form of safety or sense of assuredness for the leader to bring his cohort or her cohort along with her. I don't know whether the leaders of today is even aware of the paradigm that they are facing, to a point where they are so concerned with the day-to-day, with the requirements, with the KPIs, with all this stuff, that the larger call to action is much more important, which is to bring ambiguity to clarity.
Correct. And part of it is having that awareness, the starting point, right? The second point is, how do you bring ambiguity to clarity is when you start looking at the dots that are around you. What happened? Why is the US buying 5% of the Bitcoin? Why is this happening? Why is that? When you start looking at the dots and you start connecting the dots, you start to see a pattern. And even though you may not have an established standard, you know where the pattern is leading you towards.
And that's good enough, is it? For the time being.
That gives you milestone number one. But when you build your organization milestone number one, when clarity starts to come, or when standard starts to be established, you're further ahead than everybody else, because everybody else is saying, oh, how did that standard get there? We have no basis to get to that next point. But you're there, you can go to milestone 2, and milestone 3. And that's why there are winners and losers. Right? Whenever there's a transition, if you look back in history, the old companies, why didn't they survive? These companies in the past, the Ataris and so on, or the Yahoos, or the Alta Vistas and so on. When search just transition, there's always going to be winners and losers. Who are the winners? The guys that saying, let me take a bet and let me understand the dots and try to make sense of it as best, and then build an organizational strategy for that. Why? I mean, you talk to any GLC or any MNC in Malaysia, what's your cryptocurrency strategy? None, right? I cannot even imagine anyone is thinking about it. But hey, the US government, the Chinese government, everybody's thinking about digital currency, but we are not even thinking about it. But you should be thinking about it. Maybe you don't understand which is the right currency. People say Bitcoin, but could be Ethereum for transactions, could be. But at least you know that let's dabble in it and let's figuring out maybe 1%. Let's play around with 1% and get to there. But that's my point.
But there's also that whole idea of the winner really does take all. Using your analogy, the US dollar was the king, right? Market leader. Today, if you use today's language, Google has what, 97% market share in terms of search. Back in the, let's say 100 years ago, Standard Oil was controlling everything. And then of course then the creation of antitrust, for instance, came about. Do you feel that there's going to be not just a winner in terms of all these new standards coming to play, but the winner does really take all?
So in the past, it's because that one person, Rockefeller, for example,
for that,
he
for
figured
that time,
out,
the man of the hour.
The guy who made money is not the guys who invented cars. Who made money? Rockefeller. Because he figured cars need petrol, and petrol needs petrol stations, and let me corner the entire oil market.
And of course, he owns the railroad at the same time. Why not?
So you look at the Zuckerbergs and all these Bezos and all, they say, hey, data is the new, attention is the new currency, data is... So they've built infrastructure to harness it, because they've connected dots. And that's why they're building it.
The 2024 version of the railroads, I suppose.
Exactly, right? Exactly. So then you start to say, if more people have awareness, if more people are connecting dots, the likelihood to have these big mega win all will be less. And you say search, right? But today ChatGPT search kicks butt, in terms of Google. Google's like, hey, I'm good. And there's Claude, there's many other guys that are coming into the search space, right? So there is, when there's more awareness and more people can see dots and they start connecting it, there's more competition.
Okay, I'll go for a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more with Roshan Thiran of Leaderonomics. Thanks for staying on. I have with me Roshan in his very nice, quaint little house here in Kuala Lumpur. Roshan, the thing that I want to explore next is on generational friction. What we normally see over the past, say, 80, 90 years is that you reach a maturity in terms of age, literally age, where 40 years old or 50 years old, and you become a leader. And then, of course, when you hit 60, you go into retirement. If you're lucky, you can become a mentor of sorts, or you go into the boards, stuff like that. What I do realize during this age of turmoil that you speak of, and you liken it to, say, 100 years ago, leaders come from everywhere, young and old. Ageism is something that we have to combat, considering that a lot of people still become leaders at the age of 80, 90. Tun Mahathir, for instance, Tun Daim, the late Tun Daim, for instance. They are still leaders and they're still looked up highly in terms of their sage, their wisdom, and so on. Young leaders came about from generals like Omar Bradley, for instance, or General MacArthur. They were all generals in their 30s, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, business leaders as well. Do you feel that now's the time for us to actually embrace that whole notion of a leader can come from anywhere? Age is not a factor. And just because you're 40 or 50 years old doesn't make you an automatic leader yourself. You can be a 20-something and still be an excellent leader with wisdom to boot. Where do you feel that generational friction that's going to happen moving forward?
Yeah, so actually, if you look across, I don't think there's much differences in all generations, right? We always have the 10% that will be the smart ones that will figure out things and connect dots. The problem with smart people and leadership is that many smart people cannot become great leaders because they are too smart. And here's I'll give you a good example.
Too smart.
As a you're a smart guy. You're a smart guy. Some of us are smart. But when we see something and we say A B C D E F, this is it. I solved it. It's A B C D E F G. When I communicate it to my team and say, hey guys, here's what we need to do, A, B, C, D, F, I won't, it's so easy, kacang putih. Let me just go to B. And then C, I'm sure you know C, okay, let's go to D. Let's go to F and G.
The whole idea of assumptions.
Correct. So I will communicate B, G, F, D, and so on.
Incomplete picture.
But I miss out A because, we get it, right? But then the guy underneath is saying A, what's A? I'll make it up based on my experience, based on my understanding.
Or your own...
And so on, what happens is, what leadership is about, helping move an organization one space to another, a nation from one place to another. If you cannot mobilize, if you cannot influence, if you cannot enable people to move together, everything will start to crumble. People will go in different directions. They're all working hard, but things will crumble. And so what we start to see is that there is communicators, and we say, those are sales guys, those are relational guys. But it's not. No. It's the fact that they take time to understand, and they said, let's figure out how to influence and how to move. And so we start to see smart fellas doing all these things, and then leaders trying to take all these things. And Robert Kiyosaki, when I met him, he told me something very interesting. He said, I'm a C student. And he says, C students, what we do is we build businesses. And A students
will do the work.
Will end up working for me, the C students, and the B students work for government.
He gave me a lot of hope back in the late 90s when I was still in school and still getting grades. But that's true. But it is an immutable truth, unfortunately.
Correct. Yeah. So if you look across generations, there's going to be the communicators or the leaders. There's going to be the smart guys. And there's going to be people who don't care.
Whatever.
Right? And across generations, you will find this. Now, the problem is we deal with a few people and we say, this generation can't tabli pakai, tabli this, that. We make all these assumptions. But if you look back at my generation, it's the same thing. There's all these groups that are the high flyers, the figured out things. There's guys that say, I want to patch things together, I want to connect dots, which become leaders. And they start to be able to communicate it. And the guys who say, just give me a job lah, cukup lah, And so when you look across them, I don't think there's dissimilarities. I think where it's changed a little bit is what Abraham Maslow calls the hierarchy of needs. Yeah. Now, when I was starting to work, when I worked in GE, I got a laptop, in 1993, 1994, when I got a laptop, and then, I got paid relative, this 1993 or 1994, okay? So I got this decent pay. I was like, ooh, this is the best company in the world, man. Now, that was my standard of the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Today, if you give them laptops and all, I want recognition, I want this, I want training, I want this.
Validation.
But now they've reached the point where I want to find meaning. You think
of
the cycle, right?
Yeah.
It's about finding meaning.
Yeah.
And ultimately, when you look at the hierarchy, because they're looking for purpose, they're looking for purpose-driven, companies start to evolve and say we need to help employees because, again, they brought them an environment where their basic needs are taken. The security needs are taken, their self-esteem needs are taken. So ultimately what they're looking for is meaning. So then they come up and say, I want to look for jobs in meaningful places. I want to work for organizations that have meaning. And so leaders have to start understanding that as the generations become more wealthy or brought up in a different way, they move up the chart. But in terms of personality, capability and all, I think it's the same. I think you're 10%, you always find the 10% very capable. You find the bottom 10,
yeah, I mean, standard deviation.
Correct.
Normal distribution, I mean.
But where it differs is the needs lah.
Okay, so speaking of which, when we speak to young people, they do argue that economic safety is of course important, but not a priority. All of them echo your statement, basically saying that a purpose or a meaning at the workplace must be very essential for them to stay there. There's a report, jobs report by Peopology, if I'm not mistaken, published last year, where Gen Zs hop 9 times on average before they hit 30, compared to my generation, millennials, where on average we hop twice before we hit 30. That's a scary thought because if you think about it, when a report says Gen Zs hop 9 times, there are some that, on average, that means there are some that hop 15, 16 times before they hit 30. And of course, you have those that hop twice or 3 times. Can you learn anything when you hop jobs 15 times? Before you hit 30, let's say you go to university, or I don't go to university, you start work at 20. In a decade, you hop 15 times. What can you learn? What relationships are you building?
I think there's another problem we didn't talk about is the attention deficit disorders that are part of, because we are a generation where growing up with technology, that everything is at your fingertip. When you start a job,
and 3 seconds is an age.
And this happened in China when I lived in China 2003 to 7. I saw the same thing happen. The Chinese wanted promotion every 3 months, 2 months, 5 months. They wanted to be promoted because they said, hey, and they got it, because there were new companies being set up. So GE will set up, then somebody, Honeywell will come, and somebody else, oh, this guy is GE guy, okay. So they actually got paid for doing this jumping. And so what happened is they've built a culture where every 6 months they're looking for something, right? Now, we all here is because of iPads and all these other technologies that they've grown in, your instant gratification becomes very important. And what happens is at some point in time, they start to realize that I need to build some roots, I need to build some relationships, I need to build some networks, I need to build some depth in my development because at 30s and I have no depth and I've had many jobs in many industries but no depth, I'm not being paid. I won't be paid because ultimately you're going to be paid for depth, right? And they will come to a realization that, hey, I need to change. And it's generational, right? Because some generational they'll go this way, and then after a while they'll figure it out. And the next generation are looking at their parents and saying, "Oh, I don't want to be like that." And you got a completely opposite, right? But to me, that's just a factor of the transitionary world we live in, because it's so confusing to know what's going to work, what's not going to work. Fintech, a lot of sexy topics. But when you go down to it, it's taking what we are doing here. At least we are taking banking from the old ways and just transferring it to digital. But the world is calling us to relook at the entire business model, the entire way we operate. Fintech is not about taking a banking model and digitizing it. It's about relooking at how every single aspect of being bankable works.
But the moral of the story is this, right? I mean, we're running out of time, but where do you see actors like state actors and businesses and non-profits? Do they still have a place in this whole transition age that you speak of?
Absolutely, because what they need to find is the sweet spot for them to navigate that works, right? Because ultimately, right, as things start to evolve, things will become clearer to say what is the role of a government, what's the role of corporates, what's the role of community organizations. There's always going to be needs. There's 8 billion people, right? There's always going to be needs. There's always going to be an underserved population or segment. There's always going to be solutions that need to be brought to market.
I would like to argue that even the 3 actors I speak of, sometimes the roles are blended. I mean, if you think about it, governments are now trying to build for-profit agencies
Yeah.
and corporates are now setting standards that the government is supposed to be doing, and of course, community bodies are just doing a bit of both, I suppose.
Yeah, because and this happens not just in that three actors, right? It's also happening inside a company. So if you look at a company, right, finance, IT, HR, non-essential areas, right, are being blended. No, I mean I look at it as a value add. If if your company is about
the
building
main driver is say the product
or the
and
service
the sales
or the whatever that.
We're looking
these
at
are things that you have to do for compliance.
Yeah.
But all these things are blending, right? And you saw what happened to marketing. Marketing as a function moved from being a soft advertising, type of organized to a completely data analytics organization.
Yeah.
HR, same thing. They are moving away from being a soft talking to people into an employee intelligence function. Like if you talk to people like Tarif, they'll tell you it's all about intelligence and it's about data and it's about analytics, right?
If you missed the Tarif episode, just head on to the economy at Astro AWANI and look for Tarif. It's a very interesting conversation.
Yeah,
It's
unbelievable guy,
company.
right? But I mean, he's teaching me that, hey, you see how the functions are morphing, right? But so when you start to see the morphing, it's because there's a new order. But we are still thinking in segmentations. So what's the new order going to look like? If you look back 500 years ago and you look back today, the way we sell, the way we buy, everything is morphed. Now the same thing is going to happen because digital currency, all these little banks on knots are going to cause dents that are going to completely destroy the old ways. And this is how you get to equilibrium. When completely you got rid of horse tracks and old ways and you completely changed it with car tracks, with petrol stations, with this. So you have to destroy the old ways and rebuild new ways. And this destruction and rebuilding is that process that gets you to the new way.
But as scary as it sounds, it does provide some form of excitement because we don't know what the future is going to hold. My last question to you is this. When will we reach the equilibrium based on your, I guess, prognosis of the situation right now?
So, I mean, in the past, it took, 30, 40 years. I think it'll be much faster. I think in the next 10, 15 years, you will start to see examples, role models.
But you have leaders like Xi Jinping and Trump and I don't know.
I think this is also partly, it's the same thing that happened, right? You had the Hitlers and the Mussolinis and all that. The wonderful,
Churchills,
the wonderful, folks at that time.
Yeah.
And to me, I think this is, the beautiful thing is there's a little bit with the internet, with the power actually now moving to us. You have power in financials with Bitcoin. You don't have to be governed by somebody to be able to transact across the world. So there's a lot more power at the individual level. And I think the collective brilliance of all the individuals coming forward will give us a much faster runway to get to this point. I actually am very hopeful because to me, I look at this opportunity. I think it's opportunistic for a country like Malaysia to say, let's get experts on cryptocurrency, let's get experts and build the future in a small little pilot, and we become the model for everybody else.
Yeah.
Because we can get to set the standards, we can get to, in a 30 million population, big enough, not small enough like Singapore, but big enough, but not massive enough that creates, that you can't actually succeed, right? I think we have the opportunity with ASEAN leadership, with all the things we talk about, to be saying, hey, generative AI, let's think about and exploring blockchain, cryptocurrency, or cybersecurity. I mean, let's look at all these areas and let's be the leader in this space. Forget about all the stuff the other guys are doing. The finance. I mean, what Singapore does is Singapore does. We should be center of excellence in one or two spaces and be really big into it and be the model for the world.
2025 is bearing down upon us. What's your New Year's resolution, if you have any?
Mine
is still the same, quit smoking.
Okay.
I sometimes succeed. Somebody told me this, a friend of mine. Quitting smoking is so easy. He's done it multiple times, he said.
Every day, right?
Every day.
Tomorrow. No, I mean, for me, COVID was really tough time for a lot of my businesses.
Yeah.
So 2025 is going to be where all of it. I mean, I've seen it slowly come together. Every single one of my businesses is going to be profitable.
Okay.
And we're going to go gangbusters, and we want to be world class in one or two of them.
I wish you all the best, Roshan. If you want to find out more, just head off to Leaderonomics or just Google it's ChatGPT. Roshan Thiran. He has a lot of works out there, prolific author as well, so do check out some of his writings as well. This is The Economy with me, Ibrahim Sani. Catch you in the next one.